A Korean Mafia boss and his friends were laughing at a black maid's accent when Keanu Reeves grabbed the mic and stopped them. He called out their cruelty, demanded an apology, and showed that real power is using your voice to protect someone who can't fight back. The bar sat on the top floor of a glass tower, floating above the city lights like its own little universe. Crystal chandeliers hung low over polished marble, and jazz slid through the air so soft you could almost lean on it. Keanu had come there only because his manager insisted he needed one quiet drink after a long day of interviews. He wore the same black suit he'd been in for hours, his tie a little loose, hair falling into his eyes. All he wanted was to disappear into a corner, sip his whiskey, and not be Keanu Reeves for a while, just a tired man in a crowded room. Across the room at the loudest table in the bar sat Jin Park. People called him a businessman to his face and a mafia boss behind his back. Tonight, he was the king of that room. His friends were draped over leather chairs, laughing too loud, their expensive watches catching the light every time they raised a glass. Waiters walked a little faster when they passed that table. The manager kept glancing over, pretending not to be afraid. Jin liked that. Power to him was the way other people's eyes refused to meet his. The maid working that section was new. Her name was Amara, and the black and white uniform did nothing to hide how tense her shoulders were. She moved carefully between tables, balancing a tray with steady hands she had trained not to shake, no matter how nervous she felt. She had crossed an ocean for this job, left her mother and younger brother behind, sending money home every month. Her accent was thick, her Korean still clumsy, but her memory was sharp. Table numbers, drink orders, how many times the chef sighed when the kitchen got busy. She had already promised herself one thing: no matter how people talked to her, she would not talk back. She couldn't afford to. Keanu noticed her before he noticed Jin. It was a small thing. The way Amara tilted her head to catch every word of an order, the quiet "thank you" she whispered even when customers ignored her. She reminded him of his own mother years ago, cleaning houses with a nervous smile, her accent always a little out of place. That memory landed in his chest like a stone, heavy and familiar. He took another sip of whiskey and told himself he was just there to rest, not to get involved in anyone's life. When Jin's table called Amara over, the whole energy of the bar shifted, even if most people didn't realize it. She stepped up to them with her usual careful smile, holding her notepad, trying to sound confident as she repeated their order back in Korean. The men listened, grins spreading across their faces for reasons she couldn't read yet. Jin leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing, not in confusion, but in amusement. The moment she mispronounced a word, one of the men slapped the table and burst out laughing. Another repeated her mistake in an exaggerated, mocking version of her accent. Jin watched them, then joined in, his laughter rolling out too loud, too long, drawing the attention of half the room. Amara felt the laughter hit her like a splash of cold water. She understood enough to know they weren't just correcting her, they were enjoying it. Her cheeks burned, but she kept standing there, pen in hand, telling herself to breathe, to stay professional, to not give them any more reason to notice her. The bartender looked away. The manager pretended to check a reservation list. The whole bar seemed to decide, silently, that this was not their problem. For a second, Amara's hand trembled, and the glasses on her tray clinked together like tiny bells of alarm. In the far corner, Keanu set his glass down, very gently, as if any sudden movement might break something more than just the quiet. The laughter from Jin's table crawled under his skin, dragging old memories with it. Kids at school teasing his mother's voice, the way she would laugh along, pretending it didn't hurt. He watched Amara's forced smile, the way her eyes had gone flat and distant, like she was standing outside her own body. He tried to tell himself that stepping in would only make things worse, that this wasn't his country, his world, his fight. But the sound of that laughter and the look on her face pushed against every part of him that still believed silence could be kind. Jin's friend mimicked Amara again, louder this time, making her repeat the word back while the table roared. A glass tipped on the tray and spilled, cold liquid sliding over Jin's expensive suit. The room froze. Amara's breath caught in her throat. Jin's smile disappeared, replaced by something sharper, meaner, as he rose halfway from his chair. Before anyone else moved, a microphone from the small jazz stage scraped softly as it was lifted from its stand. Every head near the bar turned just in time to see Keanu Reeves, eyes steady and jaw set, walking straight toward Jin's table, the mic in his hand and something dangerous and quiet burning in his voice as he opened his mouth to speak. Keanu didn't raise his voice, but the room went quiet anyway. The soft hiss of the microphone carried his words through the chandeliers and over the clinking glasses, wrapping every table in sudden, uncomfortable silence. He stopped beside Jin's chair, close enough to smell the expensive cologne and spilled liquor, and rested the mic against his lips as if he were about to sing, not start a war. "Say it again," he said calmly, his eyes on Jin's friend who had just mocked Amara. "The joke. Everyone was laughing a second ago." The man shrank back, the drunken smile turning stiff. His voice died in his throat. Without the chorus of laughter, the cruelty of it was naked and ugly. Jin squinted up at Keanu, confusion flickering into annoyance. To him, this was his city, his bar, his night. No one spoke to his table like that. "Hey, relax," Jin said in English, his accent sharp but clear. "We're just having fun, she knows that." He jerked his chin at Amara as if she were a piece of furniture that might agree. The microphone picked up the tiny catch in Amara's breathing. She stood frozen beside the table, tray still in her hand, wearing a practiced smile that no longer reached her eyes. She didn't dare speak, not when the manager hovered near the bar, not when Jin's men were watching her like she was part of the entertainment. Her fingers dug into the edge of the tray so hard her knuckles went white. Keanu glanced at her just for a second. In that look, she saw something she hadn't seen once since she started this job, someone actually seeing her, not as a maid, not as an accent to laugh at, but as a person who was standing there, swallowing humiliation because she had no other choice. He turned back to Jin and lifted the mic a little higher. "She doesn't look like she's having fun," he said quietly. "She looks like someone being laughed at in a room where nobody is brave enough to say it's wrong." A murmur moved through the bar. Some guests looked down at their drinks, ashamed. Others stared, curious, as if this was suddenly better than the music on stage. The bartender's hands stilled over the bottles. The saxophonist in the corner lowered his instrument, watching like a man who knew trouble when he heard it. Jin's jaw tightened. "Do you know who you're talking to?" he asked, voice low now, dangerous in a different way. He wasn't drunk anymore, he was calculating. Keanu's answer was simple. "I'm talking to a man who thinks someone's accent makes them less than him." He shifted the mic, and his next words rang clear enough to reach the last table in the shadowed corner. "You don't get to do that. Not to her, not in front of me." One of Jin's friends snorted and tried to laugh it off. "Come on, man, it's just a joke. You're an actor, you should understand. We're improvising." Keanu's eyes didn't move from Jin's. The air between them felt like a wire pulled tight. "Then improvise some respect," he said, "and apologize." The word dropped into the silence like a stone. Apologize. The bar held its breath. Jin's men shifted in their seats, muscles tensing under tailored suits. The manager took a step forward and then stopped, fear pinning him in place. Amara stared at Keanu's back, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. No one had ever demanded an apology for her before, not from men like this, not in a place where power usually belonged only to money and threat. Jin slowly rose from his chair, his napkin falling to the floor like a small surrender he did not intend to make. He leaned in until his face was inches from Keanu's, the microphone between them humming with the sound of their breathing. His smile was gone now. In its place was something cold and sharp as broken glass. "You're making a mistake," he murmured so quietly that only Keanu and the mic could hear it. "Put the microphone down before you regret it." The speakers carried his warning through the entire bar, turning his private threat into public theater, and every single person in that room waited to see whether Keanu would back away, or push even harder. The sound of chairs scraping against the floor rippled around them as a few of Jin's men started to rise, ready to turn tension into something worse. The chandeliers above seemed to dim, or maybe it was just the way fear narrowed everyone's focus to the small circle of space where two men were standing too close, with too much at stake for a simple bar argument. Keanu's pulse hammered in his ears, but his face stayed calm. Fear wasn't new to him. He had carried it through dark sets, late-night streets, and hospital hallways. It lived quietly inside him, but it didn't steer him. Not tonight. He thought of how easy it would be to nod, to apologize himself, to walk back to his drink and pretend he hadn't seen a young woman being humiliated in front of a room full of cowards. He could still catch his flight tomorrow, give the interview, smile on camera. No one would ever know. Except he would, and so would she. He shifted his grip on the microphone as if it were less a tool and more a promise. "I'm not putting it down," he said, voice still low, still steady. "Not until you treat her like a human being." Jin studied him, searching for the usual things men looked for in a fight: fear, bluff, weakness. Instead, he found something harder to move, an old, stubborn kind of pain that had turned to resolve. The mention of human beings scraped at a place inside Jin he didn't like to remember: a small boy in a cheap school uniform, standing in an English classroom while a teacher mocked his mispronounced words and the other kids laughed. His father had told him to be strong, to never be the one laughed at again. So he had learned to be the one doing the laughing, the one holding the power. He pushed that memory away and let anger take its place. "You think you're some kind of hero?" Jin asked. "You don't know how things work here." "Cruelty works the same in every language," Keanu replied. His gaze flicked to Amara, and for a moment he spoke more to her than to Jin. "My mother had an accent too. People laughed at her. I remember how small it made her feel, how small it made me feel. I'm not watching that happen again." Amara's throat tightened. She had spent so long believing her humiliation was invisible, that her pain was something she had to carry silently to keep her job, her visa, her family's chance at a better life. Hearing a stranger say out loud what she had never dared to name felt like someone had cracked open a locked window inside her chest and let air in. The room listened, captive. Somewhere near the entrance, a couple quietly set their glasses down and slipped out, not wanting their faces remembered if this turned violent. Others stayed, unable to look away. There was a sense that something more than a bar scene was unfolding, a collision between two different kinds of power, the kind built on fear and the kind that came from standing up when it was easier to sit down. Jin's tongue clicked against his teeth. "You're talking too much," he said. His fingers brushed the edge of the table, knuckles tight, as if he were fighting the urge to overturn it. His men took another half-step forward, eyes dark, waiting for a signal. The bartender's hand hovered near his phone, unsure whether to call the police or pretend this was none of his business. Keanu didn't move away. "You humiliated her in front of everyone," he said. "If you're as powerful as you think you are, it shouldn't be so hard to say one word: look at her and apologize." For the first time, Jin actually looked at Amara, not as background, not as a uniform, but as a young woman standing in front of a table full of men who held her job and safety in their hands. Her breathing was shallow. A small stain darkened the front of her apron where the drink had spilled. Her eyes were bright, not just with fear, but with something like stubborn dignity. She had not cried. She had not begged. Somehow that irritated him more than if she had. Silence pressed on his shoulders, heavier than any hand. Jin could feel the room's gaze on him, waiting to judge what kind of man he would be. Pride screamed at him to lash out, to show everyone that no actor, no foreigner could walk into his space and tell him what to do. But another voice, one he hadn't heard since he was a boy, whispered that real strength was not the ability to hurt, but the ability to choose not to. His lips curled in annoyance as if the word were poison, but he forced it out anyway. "Fine," he said in Korean, then switched to English so there would be no misunderstanding. He met Amara's eyes with a glare that somehow felt like both a challenge and a shield. "Sorry, okay? I'm sorry." The apology was stiff and rough, like a door rusted shut and yanked open for the first time. But it was still an apology, spoken into a microphone, carried through the speakers, heard by everyone. For Amara, it was like a sudden weight lifting from her chest and then crashing back down in a different shape. She didn't know whether to feel relief or fear of what this man might do to her later when there were no microphones, no famous actors, no witnesses. Keanu nodded once, as if that single word had been the real fight all along. He lowered the mic and took a step back, finally giving the room to breathe. A quiet ripple of nervous conversation moved through the bar, some people pretending to return to normal, others staring at Amara with new, complicated respect. Jin sank back into his chair with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He picked up his glass, swirling the remaining liquid, and leaned close enough that only Keanu and Amara could hear him over the low murmur of the crowd. "You got what you wanted," he said softly, his tone almost friendly. "But you just turned a small joke into a very big problem." He lifted his glass in a slow, mocking toast, his gaze drifting between Keanu and Amara like a promise. "And problems," he added, "have a way of finding people when the room is empty." The chill that ran through Amara at those words was colder than any spilled drink. As Keanu watched Jin's calm, dangerous smile, he understood with absolute clarity that tonight hadn't ended anything. It had only started something he might not be able to walk away from.